Hello, what is going on, guys? HockeyGuy1 here. Welcome to my review of Paddington 2. Paddington 2 is directed by Paul King and stars Ben Whishaw, Hugh Bonneville, Sally Hawkins, Hugh Grant, and Brendan Gleeson. The story is basically about Paddington, who finds this pop-up book inside of Sam Gruber's antique shop, and basically wants to get it for Aunt Lucy, but doesn't have enough to afford it, so kind of like puts it on hold and wants to get it job and everything, try and make that money, and then he mistakenly kind of tells Phoenix Buchanan about it, the whole thing, and in the Swan Carnival, and ends up going. Buchanan ends up going and stealing it, and ends up framing Paddington for it. So Paddington ends up getting arrested, and basically he has to try and find a way to clear his name, as well as the Browns have to try and clear his name and kind of prove Phoenix Buchanan is guilty. So the story is really good. It's the whole type of story this is just really kind of works. I mean, it's the whole kind of thing where it's like the villain kind of does something and gets the book and something, or like an object, and kind of like frames a hero kind of story. I mean, I like that kind of story. I mean, it works really well for this movie and how it's executed, especially with how big of a role they have this pop-up book that Phoenix Buchanan steals to the story. I mean, it's just really good how they end up doing that. I mean, it's rather interesting how it goes, especially since this entire movie basically trying to like prove Paddington's innocence, as they know that like he wouldn't lie to someone. I mean, because like, the Browns know him very well. I mean, it's just a really well progressed story, and it's just really investing throughout. I mean, you just really feel it throughout. I mean, because like you really know. I mean, it's just like all the jail things. I mean, it's just sort of really, because like Paddington makes like the whole jail kind of more of a happy place, and it's a jail. He makes it a happy place. Like, that's just something that's like really special with this whole story. I mean, it's just like really interesting, and it just makes for like a really kind of like loving and like charming. So the structure is really good. The first act really kind of like sets the tone of the movie, really does a good job kind of start the movie out, and it starts off kind of like showing kind of what Paddington's been doing with the community since the last movie. It's a good way to kind of like introduce a new kind of aspect and really like show what's been going on since the last movie, and then they kind of get into where he goes into Sam Gruber's antique shop, kind of discovering this pop-up book of London. I mean, obviously, like, he can't afford it, so they kind of put it on hold for him, and so, because he does want to get it for his Aunt Lucy, and then he kind of, like, introduces, like, this whole thing where it's, like, the whole thing, like, he's trying to get money, and he's kind of, like, at the kind of hair shop for, like, a very short amount of time, and then kind of gets fired because he ruined this person's hair, which, actually, there's going to be more on that later, so, and it's just really kind of interesting way to like kind of introduce the movie, and then they kind of like get into it. Like, he goes to the carnival, kind of like tells Phoenix Buchanan all about this, but then Phoenix Buchanan like ends up asking where Papa Book is, and he kind of like tells him, and then doesn't really realize what he's done. So yeah, and then it kind of shows Phoenix Buchanan. He goes in, steals the Papa Book, and it just like sets up the entire story, because like Paddington ends up getting framed for it because he tries to stop him. And then it just kind of like disappears, and it looks like Paddington is the one who ended up mugging the place. So, and they end up getting arrested for it, which is like a really good way to kind of like set tone of the movie. It's a good way kind of like start it off in the first act and just really kind of like introducing the whole thing of what this whole story is mostly gonna be about. Then the second act kind of continues that whole idea. It's just kind of how, like, obviously he's arrested, like, he tries to kind of make himself look innocent with the whole judge thing, but obviously, because, like, the judge is obviously going to be a little bit biased against him, because it ends up connecting back into, like, the whole first act where he ended up being fired from that salon job, as it's the judge is literally the exact same person who he gave a bad haircut to, so they kind of, like, make that kind of just by the fact that the whole, obviously, evidence kind of, like, went toward Paddington being innocent, but he ended up pleading guilty because obviously like, he's going to be slightly biased because of that. So I do think they did a good job kind of like connecting the first and second act together like that, and just kind of making it seem like it's more kind of connected pretty well, and they do a good job of like making each event kind of like affect each other. And yeah, obviously like he's in the jail, and it's obviously not thing, but I do really like how they end up doing these whole jail scenes. I mean, it's just really interesting how they do it. I mean, he even like goes against until Knuckles like change the menu and ends up getting him to change the menu. Even I mean, it's just really kind of interesting because like obviously the Knuckles, like you can kind of tell that like all the prisoners, and he's just not a good person. You know, he's just really and that, but Paddington ended up getting him like kind of changed after like getting the Marmalade, and it's just really kind of interesting. I mean, it's just how Paddington ends up doing is making the whole jail just a much happier place just from that. I mean, it's just really interesting how they do that. I mean, it's just kind of goes against like your expectations of what a jail scene would be like, because normally like a jail scene just kind of like dark, boring, and there's just not much. But Paddington ends up making like more of like a happy place, and it's just really kind of surprising how you do something like that. And it's just really just shows what kind of character Paddington is, and just a good way to kind of like progress the story is basically, there's kind of have the Browns, like they're trying to prove his innocence, and obviously like they kind of like get on Phoenix Buchanan because of what he said, and it's just really a good way to progress the story. It just really keeps you engaged into it, and especially when he goes into a visit, and it's kind of like that, and then there's whole Knuckles like trying to get him to like kind of get him to think that he's putting his innocence when they miss one visit, and then they kind of like just escape together, and then Paddington breaks off from him because he realized he lied, and it's just a really interesting way that they kind of like progress the second act that way, and then they kind of have Paddington meet back up, and then they kind of like get into it after that. It's just really interesting how they kind of like continue this and like connected each act to each other. Then you got the third act, which kind of starts out with the climax where he kind of realized that Phoenix Buchanan is like leaving this carnival, and it's like he already has everything from like his whole planning. It's just really kind of interesting, and especially since like they end up hijacking on a train, like chase his train, and it's just really kind of an engaging climax for the type of movie this is. It's just kind of surprising. I mean, you wouldn't really expect something like that for a climax of this kind of caliber of a movie, and it's really exciting how they kind of like do that, and then they kind of like go in and end up starting the Buchanan after like he kind of like opens the thing, and obviously you can't remember it because of the bump, and then he kind of like look against him to get the evidence, and then basically like after that Brown kind of like tricks him as he kind of like almost kills Paddington, and then takes a picture of it, and it's just really a good way to kind of like solve the climax, as because that's how they kind of like figure out that obviously Buchanan is the one who was guilty, and it's just really interesting as that is basically what solves the plot, and then you kind of get there as Paddington does end up getting saved by the kind of like prisoners who kind of have a change of mind, which and it's just a really kind of interesting way. And then it kind of ends. I mean, the movie kind of like ends in a very good way. I mean, you get him like after being in a coma for a few days, he kind of wakes up on his Aunt Lucy's birthday, and realizes that like he didn't end up getting the pop-up book for her, which he really wanted. But then they kind of had a new idea, like just simply invite her over to London herself, and then Paddington ended up being back up with his Aunt Lucy to end the movie. And it's just a really good way to end a movie, as it just really shows, because that's what Paddington kind of like wanted the whole time, is sort of like win this London, which is why he wanted to get the pop-up book to begin with, but obviously he couldn't get it, so they end up bringing her there, and it's just a really sweet way to kind of like end the movie, and it just really concluded the movie really well. Pacing is really good. The film definitely did end up going out to its runtime, and it did feel really engaging and interesting throughout. So and it definitely did a good job with it, as it did feel complete and was really engaging throughout. Paddington is a really good character. I mean, he's just a really feel-good character. I mean, he's really lovely. He's really is just a charming character. I mean, he's really just a feel-good character, because like he really wants to take this pop-up book for his Aunt Lucy just because of how much she did for him. I mean, he knows a lot, and he's just really nice kind of character. Just really kind of, I mean, he's just a really kind of feel-good character, because he even makes the whole jail feel like a happy place. I mean, he's just a feel-good character. I mean, that's really is what I like about his character. I mean, he does a really good job with, and just, it's just how they write it, just making you really feel into the character, and just really kind of a feel-good character. The Browns are all really good characters, especially Mrs. Brown. I mean, she's the one who, like, really tries the hardest to, like, kind of prove Paddington's innocence, and she's just a really good character. I mean, she's another kind of feel-good character. I mean, she just really just tries to prove Paddington's innocence the most. I mean, all of them doing a good kind of job with that. Same thing, like, Mr. Brown's also, like, a really good character in that kind of case. I mean, at first, she kind of thought that Miss Brown was crazy for going on him, but then you kind of got over time why she was on him, and, you know, it just made sense for his whole, I mean, it's just really kind of get you more into this, and you're just really good characters just trying to help Paddington, you kind of get out of jail and get kind of clear in a sense, and just really just show him that Paddington is really innocent, while Phoenix Buchanan is really guilty, and they end up doing in the end, and they did just really good characters in that case. Knuckles is also a pretty good character. I mean, he just seemed like at first like the kind of one person who was just really a not nice person at all, like in the jail cell, but obviously because of like Paddington, I mean, he ends up becoming like just kind of a much nicer person, really. I mean, he's just really kind of an interesting character. I mean, at first like, he just seemed like the normal kind of cook who wasn't very nice to people, and just ended up him nice because of Paddington that made like multiple things and multiple recipes. I mean, it's a really kind of interesting character, and then he obviously does end up someone helping Paddington, but then ended up kind of like going away from him and then come back. And really, there's the character, part of his character that was really good about his character, that was really stood out, was more so the thing where she just kind of seemed like at first where she's a normal, kind of a not very nice person who cooks things at the jail, and then just kind of gets nice about it because of Paddington. Is really just kind of interesting how they end up doing that with his character, as it really just shows how there's kind of just more into one person. Is kind of, there's always kind of somewhat good in one person. Phoenix Buchanan is a really good villain. I mean, he's just really intimidating, and basically he has this whole kind of like plan. I mean, he just wants this pop-up book because he gets to go around places, and typically they try and figure out these notes, and they get this one goal. That's what really motivates him to do everything. And it's just a good motivation, and then it really makes him intimidating, kind of, is it's just how, like, good he kind of is with disguises, and as they just really did a good job framing Paddington, and it's just really a good kind of way to really show how intimidating he can be, especially, like, in the climax, when he, like, nearly kills Paddington. I mean, he's just really kind of intimidating in that kind of sort. I mean, he just is a really well-written villain in that case, as he just has a really good motivation, and it's pretty intimidating with how his plan is, and he's just really good at like kind of going out with his plan, and just really almost really gets away with him before the Browns end up catching up to him. And then really, I mean, he just really just that's kind of smart with his plans, and that's what really makes him a good villain. The acting is really good. Once again, Ben Whishaw does do a really good job as Paddington. He just really feels confident, and he's really into that role with how he's using his voice around. And there's also Hugh Bonneville and Mr. Brown doing a really good job, really feeling like the character. And then there's Sally Hawkins as Mrs. Brown doing a really good job, feeling like the character, just really confident, and it just really matches the tone of the character. And is also there's Hugh Grant, who's kind of like new, playing Phoenix Buchanan, just really kind of giving, you know, kind of right voice for the character, just really kind of feeling confident in each of his times, like he stages and like moves, and well as like uses his voice into it. And then also Brendan Gleeson as Knuckles does a really good job, just really feeling like a kind of prisoner, just with each line delivering, just really feeling confident in everything he says, and just really does a good job kind of like matching movements. The cinematography is pretty good. I mean, they do a good job kind of showing the landscape seen many times, and they do a good job really kind of showing the kind of close-ups in the characters' emotions a lot, and it does really show at the right moments a lot, especially like in a lot of the jail scenes. They really do a good job with that specifically, like when Paddington kind of confronts Knuckles is a good example of this, like where they use the close-ups to really kind of show each character's emotions. They're doing a good job with that, and it just really kind of shows throughout this movie, and I feel like that scene is like the easiest, best example they use for that. Is basically shows a good job throughout the movie, but that scene specifically does it really well. The set designs are really good. Just again, they really still show that the neighborhood of Paddington just looks really good. I mean, I like how they're doing that, and same thing like the whole. There's new kind of sets of like the judge kind of court. It just really looks good, and good. It feels like you're inside your court, and same thing goes for the jail. I mean, I like the whole design of the jail. It just really kind of feels like more of a normal jail inside of London, and does a good job kind of like doing that. And same thing with Phoenix Enchantment Carnival. They do a good job kind of like making that feel like a real carnival, despite that it's obviously by the villain, and it's a really good way to kind of like show the set. That said, I do have like one very small negative. I mean, it's kind of like Knuckles and the other prisoners. I mean, it kind of feels like they flip-flop a little too easily, and it doesn't make sense. Like, it seems like at first they're kind of like with Paddington, and then they kind of reveal that they were just trying to make themselves get out, cover themselves reason, but then they end up saving him in the end, and it just feels like they flip-flop a little too early. It's too much, and it just really just doesn't really seem like it makes sense that much. It feels like it just kind of like slightly there just because the plot kind of needed it to happen there, and it just feels like they kind of flip-flop too easily for the sake of it, and it's just, that's about it. So overall, Paddington 2 is a fantastic movie, and it's honestly even better than the original Paddington. So I'm going to give Paddington 2 a 9.5 out of 10. That was my review of Paddington 2. What are your thoughts on Paddington 2? Tell me in the comments below. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.